Okay, well, anyways, starting from now,
Thank you.
start
Perfect start.
starting from now. If you're watching this, good day and welcome to the Absolute Zero Effort Science Show. This is a show where a bunch of completely unqualified but very enthusiastic nerds talk about science without doing any real research. So, if you like nerd stuff and feel like yelling at the screen for an hour or so while we get things totally wrong, settle in, cause here we go. If you're watching live on Twitch, which you're probably not, congratulations, you can yell at us in real time. My name is OJ, and my qualifications are as follows. I have a webcam and a microphone, and sometimes I play games on the internet. In my spare time, I watch videos and read stuff about science. With me today are my friends Ed and Daniel. We'll start with Ed. Tell us about yourself and what you do and stuff.
Hey guys, I am Ed. I'm a lifelong science nerd enthusiast. Star Trek got me going, and what do I do? I make movies. I make video games. I love sci-fi. I had the privilege of working on the Mass Effect series. So there's my science cred there is one day we will discover the mass effect, and that can let us do space magic. We're holding out for that, and
Word.
yeah, these days I'm making movies about kind of future tech, augmented reality, how that'll affect our world. So I'm super into like the psychology of humans and science and that intersect and how our brains can wrap their heads around all that stuff. Um, yeah, so that's me, and I love reading tons about science and love reading like sci-fi, the big, wacky, crazy ideas that are too expensive to put into movies. But maybe one day I'll try.
That's a good way to put it. Too expensive to put into movies. Okay, Dan, go.
Yes, I'm Dan. I'm originally from Montreal and I live in Bulgaria right now. There's a whole story behind that, but I won't get into it. These days I write. I write movies with Ed. I write video games and I write novels and stuff like that. Huge sci-fi nerd since I've been a kid. I actually got a degree in particle physics. Well, a degree in physics and part of a degree in particle physics because I love science fiction so much. And that led nowhere, so I got to making games, and here I am now. So
Cool. So today, I decided we were going to call this one mental masochism because Ed and Dan wanted to talk about stuff that is like really really brain bending stuff, and I'm just going to actually quote Ed here from the chat that we have around subjects like this, and so basically he wanted to talk about stuff that's on the limits of human slash biological comprehension. Things like quantifying entropy, the science of the unknown, how we conceive the undetectable, how math gives us access to things that we're not really biologically evolved to comprehend. So basically, I think personally, I think a good place to start off here is math and how math like we were talking about gives us the ability to comprehend stuff that we're not really our brains aren't wired to do. Um, and I want Dan to start off with his stupid 2 + 2 = 5 in the dinosaurs time questions, and also fuck you.
well, I'll build to that one, but yeah, it's the thing that you need to understand about math is it's kind of it's a structured language, right? It's a constructed human language in the same way that English is a language. And English doesn't have any existence outside of our brains. Like it's a pattern that we pass from human to human through education and language learning, but there's no such thing as English outside of our brains. Now the question is, and that's the mind-bending question, as astrophysicist Hubert Reeves once said, did 2 + 2 = 4 at the time of the dinosaurs? Now the underlying question under that is basically like when you say 2 + 2 = 4 is there any reality to this? Like, is there any does it correspond to something in the real world? So let's say 2 + 2 = 4. When you think about it, what does that happen? What do you do when you add 2 + 2? Like, you take objects that are to a certain degree that you can abstract. Let's say stones, for instance. Okay, you say these stones, for the purpose of adding them up, are identical. They're indistinguishable. And I have 2 stones here and I have 2 stones there, and when I put them together I have 4 stones. But these stones are completely different objects. Deep down, you can't abstract them to the point that they will be identical. They're not. They'll never be. Even in time, they're different. So let's say the wind is going to knock off a few atoms on one of the rocks. It's a different stone from the one that you were considering a minute ago. So 2 + 2 = 4 doesn't have any meaning, like profound meaning in reality. Like, for instance, okay, look at light, for instance. There's a light bulb next to me. It's emitting photons, and I can picture the beautiful Maxwell's equations that describe how this photon is emitting in the room. But the Maxwell's equations don't exist. They're a fabrication of the human mind.
I already have a headache.
Bulb is not...
So here's where you're saying 2 + 2 might not equal 4 at the time of the dinosaurs. I'm a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I want lunch. I kill 2 other dinosaurs and eat them for lunch. And my Tyrannosaurus wife kills 2 dinosaurs and eats those 2 dinosaurs for lunch. We have each had 2 dinosaurs for lunch. We have 4 dinosaurs between us. Can you prove so you said that it might not equal 4, but how do you prove to me that it equals something other than 4? Could it equal 5? Have my wife and I had 5 dinosaurs for lunch? Or are you saying my whole concept of number is wrong?
It's made up.
Yeah, because there's nobody to count those dinosaurs. Like, the Tyrannosaurus is not thinking about...
The dinosaurs can absolutely say, yeah, I could have another. I could go for seconds.
Is he counting? Is he counting? Like, the act of counting means to look at distinct objects and equate them as being similar enough that you can sum them up.
If the dinosaur killed 2 Pachycephalosauruses for lunch, and then another dinosaur steals half his lunch, he'll say, "Wait a minute, one of my lunch is missing." I think he's counted.
So how about like a situation where there's a child playing in the sand on the beach, and he makes a little pile of sand, and he says, "I have 1 pile of sand." And then he makes another pile of sand, and he puts them together, and he still has 1 pile of sand. 1 + 1 = 1. Why is that math less valid than 1 + 1 = 2? The truth is they're both valid.
You've made a bigger, different object. You now have...
Well, you're introducing the size as an important characteristic.
You included what?
You're introducing size as an important characteristic there. You're saying that size is important to defining what a pile is.
Okay.
This is where so Masochism is being achieved.
Yes. Oh, totally.
Okay.
As soon as we jumped into this problem, I was like, oh, ow. Because ultimately, basically what we're saying here is that some degree of consciousness is required for math to be real.
Yes.
And possibly for anything to be real.
Yes. Yeah, math is basically...
If I'm not there looking at the pile of sand, does the objects that constitute the pile of the sand no longer exist?
Right. Or if 2 trees fall in the forest against 2 more trees...
Oh, I hate that.
Well, so this is... Okay, so now I'm thinking, getting back to English. English is our way of defining our terms. English is our language in which we think about the universe and in which we represent things in the universe. Mm-hmm. Now, you say, does it make a sound? But you can break down sound into waves that move through a medium. Now, if I don't hear it, absolutely, it doesn't make a sound. But a wave is still transferred through a medium. So now, what's stopping me from answering the question about sound is, sound in English equals something that hits my ear, a
Mhm.
wave of energy that hits my ear, not the wave of energy itself. So we're limiting the concept of that question by our terms that are limited by our language.
You're bringing in an important aspect of science is you're bringing in observation. You're saying that things exist by the simple fact that they can be observed, and that's a very
I'm
important characteristic of
That's
science.
not what I'm trying to bring in. I'm bringing in the nature of the question about sound is limited by our concept of language and how we're defining sound,
Hmm. Yeah.
because absolutely energy transfers through this medium, which can be interpreted as sound. But another language could have a word that includes energy transferring through medium that exists whether we hear it or not. A different
So
language could actually have a term that represents what sound does. English doesn't
mhm,
have that word.
right. So let
So
me
language.
give you like another illustration of this. So
Mhm.
there's a green tree in
Yeah.
front of a house, and so that tree is there. It's observable. It has a physical reality, and there's a house.
Mhm.
And I, as an observer, I look at it and I say, there's a green tree in front of house. I've transformed that physical object into a model, like a mental model of
Mhm.
through language, and I've passed it on to you so that you can picture a tree. You're picturing a different tree in a different house than I did, but we
Mhm.
have like abstracted the actual instancing of that reality into an abstract representation. But what I'm saying is that
Mhm.
mathematics and physics is that same thing. It's the phrase, it's not the thing. It's when I'm describing an equation of how light travels or how sound travels and hits my ear, the equation is a description. It's a made up it's a
Yeah.
description in a made up language. It's not reality.
But
But the
okay,
amazing
Mhm.
thing,
sorry.
yes,
Finish your
go
point.
ahead.
No, finish your point, because I'm
I
gonna.
say the amazing thing is that contrary to English and everything else, that language of mathematics has predictability. It has prediction power, which is the mind-blowing part.
Mhm.
But okay,
Yeah.
and this is kind of where I was gonna kind of go into. I think that ultimately, from where I'm sitting, anyways, math is, like you said, those predictive powers, I think, give us the ability to have a little bit of an insight as to whether or not, anything exists or reality exists or whatever. And I think what for me, anyways, where this comes down to is that concept of the observer in the quantum sense.
Hmm.
And from what I understand, I think it's might be part of the many worlds interpretation, but an observer is basically any system that interacts with another system. And I don't know if I'm using the word systems correctly here, but like, so an electron in a certain state is technically an observer if it causes, if it actually causes an interaction of different fields or anything like that. And
Right.
so ultimately, whether or not we think a tree or hear a tree fall in the forest, whether or not we are back in the dinosaur times and trying to puzzle out whether or not a tyrannosaurus really knows he just killed four animals, like, all that's kind of irrelevant because we don't have to be the observers, essentially, or rather, we aren't the observers that are causing these concepts um to be real. I'm not sure. I hope that makes sense. Like,
Hmm.
but for me, that's kind of where this comes down to, is like whether or not we whether or not what we are conceptualizing here is, whether or not we're actually able to observe something or communicate something. Like, all that's irrelevant because the systems exist, reality exists, because, at least as far as we're able to ascertain, these quantum systems at the very base level of reality seem to exist and seem to interact. And
so with that in mind, talking about the house and the tree, yes, my imagination of this house and the tree exists only in my consciousness. Is like a linguistic representative of the house and the tree, not the actual house and the tree.
Yeah.
The house and the tree still exist.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Because
yes.
Because you have
but
this like
English
cascading.
You jerk.
But your English representation, like your mental model is a model. It's not the house and the tree. Even the house and the tree, if you see it on the street, it's like your brain fabricating a model.
Absolutely. But of course, what I perceive and how I imagine it is my own mental model representation of it. But it still exists in objective reality.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not gonna contest the existence of objective reality for sure. And I mean, one of the beauties of one of the beauties of science is that even though we have these mental models called mathematics and physics laws that allow us to describe, we're not touching, we're not. It's like I said, it's a model that approximates reality in the human brain.
Yes.
But for some reason, weirdly enough, like there's someone pouring over a steam engine that comes up with the third law of thermodynamics, and for some reason it works with information and quantum systems. Like what the hell is this? Like why is the universe behaving this way? And that was something that was truly amazing, even to like Einstein. Like he famously said that the most amazing thing about the universe is that it can be predicted at all.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's
math does not objectively exist. Math is a construct that we have created as a language to help to represent the world, and its powers are in its prediction of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Math, yes.
That's a true statement?
Yes, but I do want to kind of emphasize the idea that math is not how the universe works. Like there's
math,
it's
math
like
describes how it works, but it isn't how it works.
Yeah, right. Precisely. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's
not only.
So go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, we could imagine like an alien species that evolved completely different math with completely different language and different logic that would still have predictability powers.
Yeah, sure. So getting back to numbers and how numbers may not have an objective reality.
Right.
So can there be a straw that breaks the camel's back in an objective way? One more photon hits this thing and it explodes.
And I see what you're trying to do.
And if it's one more Planck length smaller or bigger, it becomes a singularity.
So yes.
So the number
at the same time, like.
So the number one definitely exists. Well, I suppose that has to be true, right?
You got to start somewhere. You got to start with something.
If there are only two numbers that are real, it would be 0 and 1. 0 being nothing and 1 being it exists, right?
Yes. So okay.
But those two numbers would have to be real.
Even then, we're like, so the number. Just a number, like the idea of counting number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. These are an abstraction. It's like there's no Platonic reality where the number 1 exists. We do when we say 1 and 2 is we take real objects and we abstract something about them. Same way when we say house in English, we're taking an infinite.
We have one star. We have one star in our solar system that we know of. Is that not an objective reality? Or are you saying that the number 1 is just an abstraction to define that thing over there? Even though there's just one of them, you can't say one of them times one of them equals anything other than just that one thing over there, right? That one sun in our solar system.
So even saying one sun, like you're saying that this star is countable.
It is countable. I can see it from No, it's right over there.
Where? Well,
Yeah, but
okay.
yeah, but you can't.
What's
No,
what's
I'm
a
sorry.
star?
I'm sorry. But there's the problem with that, Ed,
I don't
is
care
that.
what star is. There's only one of them over there.
But that's
There's one of them far away, 4.5 light years away.
Are
With
you
those,
getting
with that
angry?
one together.
see, but Ed, that's
Is that-
the problem right there. No, that's the problem right there. Is that you're like you can't use that as an example of numbers existing, because basically we've already established that the way you interpret reality is a fabrication.
Mhm.
So you can't point to the star over there and say that is definitely real, because the way you're even perceiving that star is fabricated. It's just a clever, combination of neurons firing and reacting to, to different systems.
So I have one collection of neurons firing that's giving me one image of the star in my head, but it's still a singular thing. It's still,
you're making it. It's that neuron cluster that's firing that's making it a single thing. In reality, in the actual reality, it's not. It's not a single thing at all.
Yeah, it's a mass of particles, and some of them are being ejected. And
the notion that we can label and identify things, and we can. So I totally understand that what you're saying is how we describe objects and how we subjectively understand them through our neurons, et cetera, is completely subjective and part of our own fabrication. But discrete things do exist in the world. We can describe what they are and how we make them discrete. But but that gets back to like the straw that broke the camel's back thing.
How
is there if you can say I add one more photon to this thing and it affects the system, does that singular photon or whatever particle, whatever thing it is, exist? I have a hydrogen atom that has one electron around it, if that's what hydrogen is. Yeah. Is that one electron not objectively one electron or one set of the electron wave particle duality? Well, is it not a discrete measurable thing as one that functions because it has that one electron, and the system of that chemistry functions based on the number of these electrons in the system, to allow them to combine and behave on each other in those ways. Does not all of chemistry rely on these objects interacting based on their numbers of things?
In the approximation of the language that we built, but I feel like that would be cheating if I pointed out that that electron going around this nucleus it could be interpreted as one single electron throughout the entirety of the universe, going back and forth in time.
Yeah,
which I love that as a concept, by the way.
I love the idea of that theory that the entire universe only has one electron in it.
Yep.
I think that's awesome.
I'm pretty sure that's been
is that
debunked, though.
Is that our interpretation of the idea, or is it actually one objectively?
This is but this is ultimately where you get down into the idea of like waveforms. Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct. So it is. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily even one electron. It is a probabilistic function.
Right. Yes.
That interacts, or that is able to interact with other probabilistic wave functions, and that is what causes these weird kind of manifestations in what we would consider, I guess, physical space. So the way, when you were talking about like the straw that broke the camel's back, the way I was looking at it is instead of just like one more particle hitting it that causes it to create a singularity all of a sudden, I'm seeing it more from the side. If you're just watching like a wave, and it's an interaction of systems. This is hard to describe, but the way I would the way I kind of see it is if it's like a bunch of waves that are kind of like fuzzing together and interacting, and when those waves line up just right, that's where you get the interaction in real space that causes the action to happen. So let's say it's one more photon. You have let's say a star that's on the verge of becoming a stellar mass black hole or something like that. And if you're looking at it from just a simple like a wave form, like if you're looking at almost like a heart rate monitor and you're seeing the wave going wow 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 like this, and that wave needs to reach this high in order to cross and all of a sudden become a singularity. And all it needs is for one other wave to kind of like vibrate along and bump that wave up over that level that it requires, or in which it would become a singularity. Like if you're looking at everything like a wave like that, the number is irrelevant. It's not even that one more wave needs to hit it. It's just that it's vibrating like this and another wave is vibrating like that as well, which causes that wave to kind of like slowly ramp up to a point where all of a sudden that object becomes a sync. Oh my god, I know this is not. I'm probably gonna listen to this and be like, this is such word salad. Go get more coffee, OJ.
But I also really enjoy how within half an hour we've gone from 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4 to what doesn't exist. I think that's strong work.
Well, that's I mean, to be fair, that's kind of where we wanted to go with this. Was like, like really like trying to wrap our puny meat brains around concepts that our puny meat brains are absolutely not wired to be able to comprehend.
This brings me to, I think, why I really struggle with the conversation that we have had around entropy. When I struggle with the idea of entropy being, say, the inverse of gravity, or entropy being a fundamental force, the same way gravity is, because I think the way you've been describing that in other conversations outside this cast is within the terms of the English language being a descriptive language, describing what we see and our interpretations of our experiences in the universe, and not, in fact, the actual things in the universe. So what I'm trying to think about entropy versus gravity in my brain, they're two very different kinds of things, but fundamentally they are even our concepts of them are absolute abstractions to what they actually are. So gravity, when I think about gravity, I think about it as a force. Now, obviously, we can think about gravity not as a force, but as a kind of a vector of movement on a 3D space-time, and nothing's pulling me down. I just happen to be going in a direction that, from our perspective, feels like gravity.
Right.
Whereas, so I'm not going to debate gravity force or not, because I'm not whatsoever. I understand
that's where I was going to go. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure gravity isn't actually a force.
But I think about entropy. I think about entropy is how we describe the outcome of various behaviors of different interactions in the universe, and it's a description of behaviors, not a force unto itself. But when we're talking about our use of language as an abstraction, everything is just a description of behaviors. And why should entropy be any different? And I think that's where I've struggled to understand how you talk about entropy as anything different, or as the inverse of gravity.
Right. So yeah, maybe
I know is the wrong word there, but you can get yourself.
Actually, yes, because I'm not super familiar with the concept, I think, of entropy being an inverse of gravity.
I think inverse is the wrong word, but
it's another facet, like a flip side of the coin. Like Ed is referring to discussions we've had about gravitational entropy, which is a very new and not really settled theory that gravity and entropy are two sides of the same thing, two sides of the coin. So, and it's basically that gravity is not a force in the same sense that electromagnetism or weak force or strong force is, where it's because if you look at electromagnetic electroweak force, you have stuff like poles. You have certain particles repel each other, certain particles attract each other, but gravity is purely attractions so
Yep.
far.
Yeah.
And so it seems that if gravity is a force, it's very different from electroweak and strong forces. And so it's very hard to reconcile. And one of the theories that's been proposed in recent years is the idea that actually gravity and entropy are one and the same thing. It's just two aspects of this thing that we see manifested in the universe. And they're the reason we have time, that time exists. Because if you look at the Big Bang, gravity is at its maximum because all the potential energy, which is the energy that a particle has when it's in a gravity well, uh, the potential energy of the universe is at its maximum because everything is smushed together and attracting each other at maximum force. And when you get to the end of the universe, like the big rip into like trillions and trillions of light years, and sorry, not light years. I'm talking like Han Solo now. Like in the infinitely distant future, everything is spread apart and gravity is basically gone, and the only thing that is left is chaos. It's pure entropy.
But okay. Just to go on that for a second, would gravity be gone? Because it's my understanding that later on, like basically past the heat death of the universe, all we'll have is black holes, basically, until those evaporate.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm talking after that, where every particle in the universe is outside of the light cone of every other particle.
Okay, so that
basically
actually kind of negates. Sorry?
What's that?
What about quantum tunneling?
Shut
I'm
up,
not
Ed.
Sure.
Okay, so that does kind of negate one of the thoughts I had earlier when you're talking about gravity and entropy being linked. I actually kind of thought about it like, because entropy is like where it's that seeking out that base state, and for some reason in my brain I was kind of picturing, because okay, when a demonstration of entropy on our planet would be something starts at the top, like a boulder starts at the top of the hill and then rolls down to the bottom of the hill, and that would be considered an increase in entropy?
I'm not sure that is an increase, because when you're looking at entropy, you're looking at larger systems. So like
okay, just for like the mental like picture example then, and then where my brain went there was, oh my god. Bye, Dad.
I'm
here.
I'm here.
Close your camera and restart it again.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Give me a sec. Don't know what happened. It just crashed.
It's
I'm
Discord.
back.
Discord. And then where my brain went there was like, okay, so if you have essentially like gravity deforming space-time and creating these wells, then technically wouldn't like any particle or larger object that falls into these gravity wells be kind of like a demonstration of entropy at work? But I suppose that's a much too simplistic way of looking at things.
Well, when I think about entropy it's interesting when you say entropy as a function of a system, because when I think about gravity and maybe other forces, let's say when I think about forces, I think about objects behaving on each other. And if does entropy only represent the outcome of a system, or can it manifest on discrete objects?
That's
like other forces.
I'm not sure. I think it can't. I think it's a property of systems. Like I don't think you can if you
systems exist.
Come again?
Or are we just describing them in our abstraction?
Well, I would say that entropy, it doesn't have any intrinsic existence beyond the physics description we do and we make of it. But I know what you're saying is like, is this a thing? Like, is there something behind the universe that's entropy?
We say, because that's kind of the core of this, is we say gravity is a thing. It acts on us, whether it's a force or if it's just kind of the behavior of our movement through a 3D space-time that from our limited narrow perspective appears like a force.
The same way that
can entropy be described as that same thing, or is it just descriptions of systems and it doesn't intrinsically exist in our reality?
That's so kind of what I was trying to get at with my description of like gravity wells interact, or like pulling things into it. It was kind of, I guess that was kind of my question, was like, is it possible to see something falling into a black hole, for example, as entropy acting on an object through gravity? But I guess, like you're saying, if it's just if entropy is simply a product of our universe as a system, then you can't really directly measure an entropic change when something is interacting with gravity, if gravity is in fact related directly to entropy.
Right.
I just said it very badly.
So here's an interesting. You were saying, like, does gravity need to be described as a force? Can entropy be described as a force? So here's like, general relativity tells us that gravity is not necessarily a force. It can be a property of a reference system accelerating or decelerating. So for instance, if you're in the bus and the bus brakes and you stumble towards the front, that behaves exactly like a gravitational field. It's in the sense of physics, it's one or the other. It's completely acceptable. And the same way that if you have what's the name for a semi-porous membrane, like for instance with the cell, that has can let let's say certain molecules outside the cell, but doesn't let them come back in. So it's like a one-way membrane. Then in effect, if you look at this, you're going to see molecules just leaving the cell. It's gonna behave like a force pulling the molecules out. It's the same way that, for instance, when you put your fingers in salted water, like your fingers are gonna bloat because the cells in your skin are gonna draw in the salt, right?
Is that entropy at work, or are we just using entropy as a language to describe a system that's inherent in the properties of those materials that are interacting?
So the answer to the question you just asked is yes.
Yeah.
So entropy is the language that we use to describe the behaviors of these systems.
Yeah. So basically, when we talk about entropy, we're trying to put a mathematical model onto something that we're observing, and we're trying to see if that model is going to allow us to make predictions.
Yeah. Okay. So
basically. But is it something else? Is it like, angels pulling at strings?
So when I think about forces, I also think about God's knobs and dials. Yes, I said God's knob. To change the nature of fundamental forces that would change the nature of our universe and clearly our existence in our universe. Does entropy have these knobs and dials? Can I turn entropy up? Can I turn entropy down? What would that affect? What would that change? What are the properties of entropy that if I were God and I had a switchboard of knobs and dials, what could be done there? Like, I can imagine making gravity stronger or weaker. I can imagine the forces that bind atoms together to be stronger or weaker. What knobs and dials can be changed on entropy?
My gut reaction, there's absolutely no scientific backing to this is that that knob would
That's
be
the name of the
accelerating and
podcast.
slowing stuff. What's that?
I said that's
Right.
the name of the podcast where we speculate wildly about shit.
That knob that you're talking about, like basically amplifying or lowering the power of entropy, would accelerate or slow down the universe, the passage of time. I think the two things are deeply intertwined. Like that's what you were talking about. It's the reading speed of the universe.
And is that a product? I guess if, like you said, I mean, it's intertwined, but is that a product of the way that all these forces have kind of unfolded, or the other way around? I guess we don't know that. Nobody
is it
knows
a product
that.
of all,
Sorry.
We don't know if it's a product of all these other fundamental forces.
Yeah.
Like if something is moving through a membrane, I think, okay, is there like electrofield forces at play in there, and entropy just describes how those things behave, or is entropy something intrinsic that's affecting that behavior as well?
That's
I don't know. I may be changing the subject here, and I should probably let Dan finish because I may be completely derailing things. But since we're talking about cells specifically, sorry, I'd say that again.
I think I feel like this podcast is turning on a pylon, just piling on Dan questions.
Well, anyway, you're getting me to the point where I'm starting to say, like, you know what? I don't fucking know.
I don't think that's the thing, though. I think it's pretty clear that nobody really knows at this point, like, because I mean, the fact that we're still coming out with that we as a species are still kind of coming out with like question mark theories about entropy and its relations to gravity, etc. I think it pretty much proves that, like, this is obviously again with the topic of the conversation here, like on the very, very limits of what we understand as a species. Where I was going to go with this. Sorry.
Go ahead, OJ. Sorry.
I
was just going to say, the reason I'm piling on Dan with these questions is he has a better idea than you and I, OJ,
way more.
Of what we
don't know. In that,
he knows what we don't know more than I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess where I was going with this, I watched a thing on PBS. I think it was on PBS Space Time earlier this year about how life is ultimately a product of entropy, and how living systems increase entropy, or like the overall entropy in the universe. Because life consumes high energy organized matter and excretes low energy
heat.
And so it's interesting when we were talking about, like, is a cell that's moving things through a porous membrane or whatever, is that an interaction of forces that is causing that change in entropy, or is it a byproduct, or is the entropy that you can demonstrate between things moving through that porous membrane, or is that a byproduct? Is the change in entropy a byproduct of that system, that living cell?
The crazy thing about physics, and I think that's why we started to have this discussion about, like, physical laws. Do they have like actual realities to them? But because we're talking at some point about, so entropy, like I said, the amazing thing about it is that some guy looks at a steam engine and comes up with the second law of thermodynamics in a very simple and clear way, and then centuries later, the second law of thermodynamics is everywhere in quantum systems and information these days, and now maybe even in gravity, and it could be the reason that time exists. So it's tempting to think that there's a big thing that we're poking behind the curtain every time we talk about entropy, because every time we look for it, like we come to new systems like quantum physics, we didn't expect entropy to be there, and then suddenly it is. Or information, it's, why is it there? Why is this a constant observation in the universe?
It's really interesting what you describe about if we change the dial of entropy up or down, it changes our perception of time. Because I wonder, like, how, like, could we change the dial of entropy to make it go faster without changing our perception of time? Like, and why then is entropy set at a specific rate that is locked into our perception of it? Why is that at a fundamental level the rate? And are we and our perception of the universe intrinsically connected to that constant? If the constant changed, could we have a perception of that constant? And that makes me think of the Ted Chiang story Exhalation, where these robots have this growing awareness of entropy directly affecting their ability to live, because they saw themselves in context of a system affected by entropy.
Right.
I think, like, from a biological perspective, you couldn't dial up or dial down the speed of or dial up or dial down entropy and therefore, like, the speed of the flow of time without drastically changing and potentially completely destroying consciousness as we know it.
Why wouldn't we just think faster or slower and then have a different perception of
because the reason we're thinking at all is a like just mind-bogglingly complex interaction of like trillions and trillions, probably I don't know, potentially even, I don't even know if you can use infinite here, but like quadrillions potentially of interactions of different quantum fields, or maybe not quantum fields. I don't know if I'm using that the right term, but basically, like, every molecule in your body is a wave that's interacting with every other wave and atom in your body, and it is only through those insanely, like, mind-shatteringly complex interactions that we even have this consciousness right now.
Yeah.
You know, so speeding up.
We're kind of touching on the anthropic principle. Like, we're dancing around it, but that's what it is, right?
Could we change the speed of entropy and then change the speed of light in the other direction and come out with a system that works the same way?
See,
we wouldn't notice it.
I don't think you would, because I think it's entirely possible that the only reason that we are able to exist the way we are right now and have this conversation is because the laws of the universe have kind of coalesced in such a way that all these waves are interacting at precisely the way that they have to kind of coalesce into what we consider consciousness. And if you disrupt that, there's no saying that you would ever have some sort of consciousness, at least as we know it, coalesce into a being.
Is there a balance where we can change knobs and dials and find a new but similar equilibrium? Maybe not as simple as turn light speed up and turn entropy down to cancel out the change.
What else
can we turn to cancel? How many different combinations of these fundamental constants can give us a universe where we can be having this conversation anthropically?
I mean, it's
anthropically
also possible.
I don't think so. Like, basically, I think, like, my gut feeling, anyway, is completely speculating here, is that you absolutely can have or could tweak dials and stuff like that, and probably have a consciousness emerge, you know, through different sorts of interactions on different time scales with different, potentially completely different mechanics behind that consciousness. I think that is probably possible, but I don't think it would, not the same, not in any way the same, and possibly not even able to interact. And I'm gonna really throw this out there, throw this off the rails now by basically saying, I think, and I don't know if I'm gonna get freaking like shit from Twitch or YouTube for this, but I think hallucinogens show you just how fragile and how thin our level of consciousness is, but it also goes a really long way to demonstrating how different consciousness could be. You know, like all you got to do is really disrupt your consciousness a couple times to realize that, okay, it's possible to be conscious, you know, or to have consciousness existing in different kind of frames like this, but it is so drastically different than what we experience day to day. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I could see it because, you know, because of some of the experiences I've had. I can like wrap my brain around the idea that other forms of consciousness could exist, but it definitely wouldn't be ours, because our current thin film of reality that we experience on the day-to-day is, in fact, very, very, very fragile, and it doesn't take much to completely shift the way that you experience life and the world and the universe.
Yeah.
So
that's why I'm wondering. Like,
so tweaking the knobs and the dials is gonna fuck shit up.
Couldn't tweak knobs and dials, but find different find things that cancel each other out, so you don't.
Sure.
It's also like, maybe it's not a dial, maybe it's a topographical property of 11-dimensional space.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a 3D. It's not a dial. It's a 3D lookup table. It's a 4D lookup table. 7D lookup table.
Yeah. So.
But it's touching on the entropic principle, basically. Like, you know, the entropy is like how it is because otherwise you wouldn't be there to observe it and bitch about it.
That just sounds like a cop-out.
It is. It's the biggest cop-out in physics.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because sorry, say that again.
How do these physicists keep their jobs?
I don't. This is the thing. I feel like the anthropic principle is like very, very quickly becoming a kind of the laughing stock of physics.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even.
Well, it's an idea. It's an idea that's not testable, so it's not really relevant, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And ultimately it's being used. It's being used by so many freaking like new age quantum woo-woo, you know, things that it's like I think it's pretty thoroughly lost any sort of credibility that it maybe had at one point. But yeah.
For me, it represents a frontier. Like when you get there, you know, you're just on the edge. Like you're poking beyond this particular model kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, my head hurts. Yeah.
I said, well, my head hurts. And for the first time, I've gotten Dan to the point where he's like, "Fuck, I don't really know." So that feels like a big win.
You can take it, sir.
Yep. Well, we are on an hour here, guys. We can continue with all sorts of conversations if you like, but now is also the time where if you have other engagements, we can start wrapping things up. Because ultimately, as far as my talking points go, that pretty much covered all of them. The last one was basically like, you know, the concept of time, but we kind of tied that in with entropy and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The only thing I would like to add on the subject of time was something I watched again in a PBS Spacetime this week, actually. I think it was this week, about they were talking about how the reality you experience is never the present. It's always
right.
It's always the past, and you're always just seeing basically a like a slice of of a section of space-time.
The block universe.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And one of the things they said there that I thought was really interesting was that our consciousness doesn't exist in a nice, neat slice on that time scale either. It's more like a smear across space-time.
And your smear is taking different parts of a slice or angled differently than other people's based on their reference frame.
Yeah,
right.
I like the idea of thinking of our pattern, the pattern of our of our consciousness that makes us us.
Yeah.
Is ultimately, this weird kind of wiggly line across a section of space-time, because a photon hit and triggered this neuron, which triggered this neuron, which triggered this neuron, on down this little timeline. And I just think that's kind of neat. I like thinking of myself as a smear on space-time.
Yeah, I like that. There's even also the something that's even like messier is the idea of the parliament of the mind, where basically what you perceive, like when you think about how you function, you want to pick up your bottle, like you think, I make a conscious decision, I want to pick up the bottle, and then I send the nerve influx to pick up that bottle. But that decision of picking up the bottle happens before you're conscious of it.
Sure.
It's basically certain processes in your brain and your nervous system that come to a consensus, and then they push out your conscious mind to the front and say, okay, now you pretend that you want to pick it up.
Yeah.
And you actually kind of rewrite your immediate memory of that so that you perceive it as free will, but you're just kind of the figurehead without any power that's being given a piece of paper to read.
That hurts my head even more. So next time we can make the will.
Sorry, say it again.
I really want to get it. So maybe next time the topic of conversation is free will, because if we really want to hurt our heads.
Oh, that way you can go into determinism and super determinism and many worlds and Copenhagen.
When you were talking about different spheres of reality, like even here, Dan, it's nighttime for you, it's daytime for us. So I'm closer to the sun, I'm closer to the gravity well of our solar system than you. So my time is going at a different rate than your time is. Your slice of the universe is slightly differently angled than mine, even though we're able to interact.
Yeah.
And then even more so, like you were saying with the the parliament of the mind or whatever. I mean, you could ultimately look like that as part of the smear as well, because like you said, there's a certain part of your consciousness way at the back which starts firing neurons and cascading forward in time, before you come to that decision. So again, with the smear, if you were looking at the smear, actually, the way I would kind of describe it, if you're looking at it a completely 2D graph, you'd start with a very thin smear back here, and this is where your neurons are just beginning to fire, and the limbics, parts of your brain are operating back here, and it kind of like swells up to a more oblong shape at the front, which is your maybe the culmination of that consciousness.
Right.
So you're like a bullet shaped smear, or
like a slug.
Slug shaped smear. Yeah. Slithering your way forward.
Thinking about time right now in a very present and immediate way. I'm thinking about lunchtime.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's wrap that up then. Okay. Well, I guess that does wrap it up about there. Ed/Dan, do you have anything that you're working on that you want people to check out, or social medias people can follow if they want kind of updates on what you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm working on finishing up a couple film projects right now. I'm not really social mediaing those much, but people can follow me at Edward J. Douglas, both on Twitter and on Instagram. Twitter is kind of random thoughts on things. Instagram is mostly all the meals that I've been making in my quasi-pandemic isolation. Very little have to do with games or film at the moment, but you can always hit me up to chat about any of those things, the projects that I've worked on in the past, projects I'm doing now. I'm there.
Dan, anything you're working on?
So I'm working, I guess I can say this is public. I'm working on the Troy Total War DLC content at this point, so that should come out at some point. But in the meantime, if you want to check it out, you can go to the Epic Game Store. And otherwise, if you want to, I'm not super active on Twitter, but my handle is 1BluePixel. That's with the number 1. And you can find my website there as well. I got a bunch of short stories, if that's of interest to anybody.
Dan, I've find on my website. You have 1BluePixel with a 1 and also with the word 1. Which is the real one? Because I see 2 when I look for you.
Yeah, on Twitter, there's 1BluePixel with a number. And my website is 1BluePixel with ONE spelled out.
There's also another Twitter account with the ONE with the same logo. Is that not you? Have you been hacked?
I'm not sure. On Twitter?
On Twitter?
No, I'm on the, yeah, it's one with the,
Something.
because
Okay.
some kid is camping on my my full handle. So yeah, one blue pixel with the numerical 1, and you can find my website there. And on my website I have links to short stories that I've published in the past, if that's of any interest to people.
And
Cool.
then I'll just shill. You can still buy my indie critical hit, A Financial Failure, Eon Alter, on
Which I
on a
wrote.
game
Cool.
on which Dan co-wrote. Yeah, you can find that on Steam. Eon Alter. It's an awesome local co-op RPG adventure.
Cool. And I am OJ, as known as Masocast on Twitch, Masocast on Twitter as well. As for Absolute Zero Effort, these podcast things, I'm totally new to all this, which you've definitely probably been able to ascertain by now. So I don't really have like a set schedule on when some of these, or when these episodes will be coming out, but these will definitely be happening when we come up with cool topics to talk about. Dan, thank you very much for joining us this time, and absolutely pleasure. If you want to join us again for time, multi-worlds or many worlds, all that kind of topics, that would be a blast as well.
Yeah,
so I will be publishing this to YouTube under Absolute Zero Effort Science, if you want to subscribe to that. And as for when we will be doing these, if you subscribe to my Twitter, I will usually give a heads up a couple days in advance and right before we go live with something like this. So yeah, again, Masocast on Twitter, Masocast on Twitch. There's also a link to my Discord on the Twitch page, and there's a section in there for Absolute Zero Effort, so you can jump in and suggest topics for episodes, or just talk about stuff like this. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. Apologies for the technical difficulties. One of these days I'll get this shit ironed out. And thanks again for Ed and Dan for hanging out and talking about nerd stuff and speculating wildly.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. It's a pleasure.
Okay. Bye.